Selamat siang Bapak dan Ibu, hadirin yang kami hormati. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the International Seminar, Climate Change Resilience and Disaster Management for Roads. Next session is Adapting to Climate Change Risk and Disaster Management Session 2. The speakers for this session, Mr. Stuart Woods from New Zealand Waka Kotahi Transport Agency, and also Working Group 2 co-leader PRTC 1.4, Mr. Brawijaya from the Ministry of Public Works and Housing of the Republic of Indonesia, and Mr. Wei-Sen Li from the National Science and Technology Center for Disaster Reduction. And Mr. Wei-Sen Li is joining us online. And also our moderator for this session is Mr. Jongwook Jo. Mr. Jo is a senior manager, Mechanical Technical Facilities Team of Korea Expressway Corporation, and also member of PRTC 1.5. So the presentation for each speaker is 15 minutes and followed by a discussion for 35 minutes. We would like to honorably to invite to the podium for this session, Mr. Jongwook Jo.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, and good afternoon, Excellencies and honorable guests here and online. Okay, does everyone enjoy your lunch? Okay, it's my first time in Indonesia, and I now know that food here in Indonesia is good for my taste. So thanks to the Indonesian members and staff once again. And now the time to continue the session 1, adapting to climate change risks and disaster management. We have 3 presentations for this session this time, and I'd like to invite the first speaker, Mr. Stuart Woods. He has more than 35 years experiences in traffic engineering, transport planning, strategy, and policy, and also has worked in local and central government and consultancies. He is currently the lead advisor of resilience at Waka Kotahi, New Zealand Transport Agency, and Working Group 2 co-leader for PIRAC Technical Committee 1.4. Mr. Stuart, please join. And welcome. Mr. Stuart, please.
Kia ora tātou, ko Stuart Woods o Kei Roto o I Te Transport Services. Hei ka tohu arahi manawaroa taku turanga mahi I Waka Kotahi. No reina tēnā koutou katoa. I've introduced myself in Te Reo Māori, the language of the New Zealand Māori, and in English. Greetings everyone, I'm Stuart Woods. I work in the Transport Services Group of Waka Kotahi as the lead advisor for resilience. And now for a few facts and figures about New Zealand before I start the main content of my presentation. If we could have the next slide. Next slide again, thanks. Next slide, please. There we go. All right, so some facts and figures about New Zealand. New Zealand is located at the southern part of the Pacific Island with the yellow circle around it. Our flag is shown at the top, which is very similar to Australia's flag, and it gets confused between the two quite regularly. However, we claim that ours was the first one. In terms of the bottom row, there are some Kiwis there, our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Our national bird is the kiwi, and I am a Kiwi. The next picture along is a fruit which in many overseas countries is called the kiwi. We do not call it a kiwi, we call it a kiwi fruit. If you talk in New Zealand about wanting to eat a kiwi, you may have an interesting conversation with the police. The other pictures running down the side are of Auckland City at the top, which is not our capital. The middle one is of Mitre Peak in the Middleford Sound, which is one of our great tourist attractions, and many overseas visitors visit there. And the bottom one is of a team called the All Blacks, who play some pretty useful rugby union at times. Next slide, please. And in terms of the transport system of New Zealand, my transport agency, Waka Kotahi, manages and owns about 11,000 kilometres of state highway, and across the whole country there are about 110,000 kilometres of road network. Waka Kotahi has around 2,000 staff across about 16 offices across the entirety of New Zealand. Next slide, please. New Zealand has its fair share of natural hazards and risks, very much like the list that the Minister this morning identified for Indonesia. We have wildfires, we have earthquakes, we have tsunamis, we have volcanoes, we have hurricanes. And consequently, we're under increasing resilience pressures from having more and frequently more recurring natural events. We have increasingly large numbers of assets which are in exposed situations. We have got increased expectations of the roading network from the public, from the communities, in areas such as just-in-time delivery or the centralisation of major services like major hospitals and being removed out of regional cities. We've also got, like most countries, an ageing and degrading asset base that needs a lot of attention and is underfunded. Next slide, please. We're spending increasing amounts of money on resilience, but where and on what? We're finding that we are spending that more and more on emergency works, responding to the increasing disruptions and damage. And the graph on the left there is indicating our emergency works spend over the last 13 years or so. And you can see there's a distinct upward trend. That does get modified at times or influenced by earthquake damage, which we try to separate out, but just generally it is going up. The diagram in the middle with the circle is a representation of what we call the 4 Rs, and they are our key emergency management framework in New Zealand. There are many similar frameworks across the world. It shouldn't be seen as a linear process. It's more a circular framework for a continuous and integrated improvement process. However, it could also be seen as being along 2 axes or a 2x2 matrix. The horizontal axis would relate to, are you being reactive, i.e. are you an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, or are you being proactive and being the fence at the top of the cliff? Alternatively, on the vertical axis, are you being future focused and aspirational, or are you being very present and looking at what we have now to use? Could I just click that once, please? Thank you. And using this model, we find that we're very much spending our money on that left-hand side of the diagram around the response and recovery phases. And that's despite the fact that whilst it might be economically efficient, it could be considered also morally abhorrent. We need to rebalance this and work in a more proactive and integrated space. Next slide, please. A few years ago, resilience became its own talked about issue across my agency. We didn't just focus on planning and providing for the transport system in the business as usual or peacetime, and it was getting better recognition also for being a multifaceted issue. Recognition was also driven from changing focus and expectations on a number of different dimensions, such as the natural environment, particularly with climate change becoming more prominent, having more and more complex assets and systems. Our policy environment, socioeconomic situation, demographics and urban development alongside the continuing development of technology were all adding to the dilemmas that were being confronted. Our board recognised as an issue and became increasingly concerned about better managing the risks of the system from natural hazards. This framework we created was adopted by our board in 2018, and it was based just around 2 sides of a 1 A3 sheet of paper. So in another sense, maybe 4 sides of A4. And that was purposely done in a very constrained fashion so that there was a reasonable chance that people across my agency and in sibling agencies in government might actually pick it up and use it rather than having a 50 or 100-page document that would sit on people's shelves. Next slide, please. In delivering the framework's aspirations, we've identified a series of key shifts on how we approach resilience, and also delivering them through a range of levers or areas of influence and activity, such as improving our evidence and insights, planning and decision-making processes, and prioritised system improvements. We've also more recently been considering updating this framework, which has been pretty successful. So we're also thinking about improving it in areas of having a simpler vision and a simpler mission statement, and updating it to reflect more recent legislation changes. There's been a lot of activity in the legal world in New Zealand in the last 5 years. It's also looking to make it more community-focused. Next slide, please. So as I noted on the previous slide, the framework flagged a range of desired or needed key shifts to our approach to several aspects of resilience, essentially the need for a step change in a number of areas. This is probably the key message of my presentation today, these shifts that we are really working hard to try and achieve. Firstly, trying to move from being very asset-focused and the condition of the asset, where a lot of engineers say, I don't like my asset being broken, but I don't really worry or focus so much on its use. We need to move away from that towards more community impacts and what services those assets are providing. And we see this as a 3-step process change, moving from an asset focus to a network focus, where the network is a series and sequence of linked assets. Moving that thinking to a system, so you've got physical assets, digital assets, operational practices and the like, through to the final position of looking at and focusing on customer impacts. The second one is looking to shift from thinking that big is better and it's a simple solution because we'll just throw concrete at it until this problem goes away, and trying to have it so that we are more flexible in our responses. We realise that we cannot build our way out of the challenges of resilience. That is but one solution. We need to have a big toolbox of interventions with great guidance about how, when and where to flexibly apply those solutions and interventions. The third area is about moving away from trying to retain control about things entirely and keeping it all within our own organisation, to being more collaborative and partnering. This is because we realise that we cannot do it all by ourselves. We don't have all the answers, we don't have all of the knowledge. And certainly one of the big moves in New Zealand of recent times is to try and understand and capture cultural knowledge of the Maori. So we call that Mataranga Maori. There's a lot of knowledge to be had in the Indigenous people. And also taking the approach that it's not just the state highway network that we're looking at, but a full system with multiple owners and players. And once we get this in place, we start to open up new solutions, and new ways of doing things. The fourth one is about moving from tending to focus on a single issue into being more comprehensive and rounded, to be fully across all of the hazards, risks, considering a range of severities, return periods, potential failure modes and mechanisms, and the consequences, as well as looking at the potential and a wider range of potential response types. Fifth one is about focusing on the fact that most of us are actually information poor. We may have data, but we haven't converted it, and even then we may not have a whole lot of data. And trying to focus on improving that so that we are able to make more informed decisions. Continuing from comprehensive situations and using more in-depth and broader ranges of information from areas that may not traditionally have been where we sought it. And introducing that in different ways in our decision-making, our operations, and our advice. And finally, moving from that reactive stance, which I was demonstrating on the 4 R's diagram, to a more proactive one. We need to, a lot of our previous behaviour has been driven by analytical and decision-making approaches that result in reactive responses and solutions being preferred. We need to be more active and preemptive across all 4 R's of that circle of the 4 R's, engaging on a wider range of approaches to resilience in a more balanced way, and so that we can get ahead of the curve when appropriate, rather than always being in the reactive mode and being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And that would be great to see the different balance in our expenditure as one of the key indicators of that, between the reduction in readiness-based expenditure as opposed to the response and recovery expenditure. Next slide, please. Since the framework was adopted 4 or 5 years ago, resilience has made some progress. It has been slow, it's been sporadic, and it's been across all 4 of the R's, or all of the levers. We have been joining up and collaborating with memoranda of understanding with our co-government science organisations, other groups, Māori, iwi, communities and the like. Our climate change policy has been developing both across mitigation and adaptation, which was touched on earlier. Our emergency management practices, both in terms of the capacity and the capability of people, has been developing. Our climate change has been a big focus over the last 2 or 3 years, and we've been working hard on developing a climate change adaptation plan for the organisation, and I'll come back to that shortly. We've developed a range of tools, a detour routes tool or an alternative routes tool, an economic assessment tool, which will give us the GDP effects of a disruption. And we've been working hard on developing geospatial platforms to present and coordinate and allow queries of our data. And finally, I'd give a nod out to Neil Fisher and his team, one of my colleagues here, and the work that we're developing on the security focus as well of our assets. Next slide, please. Just as one particular example, and the most important and highest profile for Waka Kotahi in a recent time and in our resilience program, is developing our climate change plan. Nicole Rosie, our Chief Executive, recently said that climate change was the most important issue for Waka Kotahi, and higher than road safety, which had surprised me when she said that. This is our first entry into developing an adaptation plan. It's enterprise-wide, all of organisation. It will have regular reviews. It is relatively high level in setting the foundations and framing itself around 6 themes and outcomes as we move forward. It's integrating with a whole of government adaptation plan, which our government released about 3 months ago. And that has got transport system expectations and actions in it, which we're complying with. We expect to have our adaptation plan for Waka Kotahi online by Christmas. And recently, just in the last week or so, when it's been accepted and endorsed by our executive level management, it has certainly got their attention about the size of the issue and the changes needed, particularly given that it's had relatively low resourcing to date. We then will move early in the new year to implement, or beginning a process to develop an implementation plan following on from that. Next slide, please. Finally, this is just a conceptual diagram of my perception related to some of the step changes that we need to take, and an idea maybe for future dashboarding. It's not been metrified, it's not been expanded particularly far. I do find when talking to managers about resilience that one of the problems is that most indicators are backward looking and that they tend to want to have a single number answer. But resilience cannot be meaningfully reduced to a single number. At Waka Kotahi, we are on a journey, and I've just quickly touched lightly on a number of parts of our story for resilience, and we're making variable progress across our different step changes. Could I have a click, please? So once upon a time, we may have been where this red line was on each of the different axes of the different step changes that we need to make. Another click, please. And we may be sort of moving outwards along each of these, and I would pretty confidently say we're not moving backwards, we are moving forwards, but we are moving variably. We've moved quite significantly in the collaborative space. We have not moved so much in the reactive to proactive shift, for example. And the last click, please. And this may be where we're aiming for, that we've got a journey to go, we've got lots of areas to work on. This could give you a forward-looking, aspirational sense of how you're developing and progressing with resilience. This might be a useful way for how we all evolve and consider our priorities for investing in resilience going forward. Thank you. Kia ora.
Please have a seat. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stuart. Thank you for the informative presentation. I think it's very easy to understand because you're showing a timeline, and categorized approaches for the story. So thank you for the presentation. So the next. I'd like to invite next speaker, Dr. Brawijaya. Title of a presentation is Policy Development for Sustainable Construction in Indonesia. He has been involved in design and construction of various roads and bridge structures for metropolitan and toll roads since he completing his doctoral program at Rensselaer Polytech Institute, New York, 2005. In 2015, he was assigned to develop infrastructure's master plan for Indonesian seven main islands during 2018 to 2021. He worked at the sub-directorate of sustainable construction. He is currently head of National Road Implementation Agency for North Sumatra Region, Ministry of Public Works and Housing, and also member of Indonesian Road Development Association, Indonesian Engineers Association, and Road Engineering Association of REAAA, and Association of Indonesian Construction Safety Engineers. Oh, you're here already. Okay, thank you. So please welcome Mr. Brawijaya.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the time and the opportunity provided. I would like to deliver a presentation on policy development of sustainable construction in Indonesia. And there are four topics that I would like to present. The first one is about the government regulation number 14, 2021, specifically for Article 84 and 85 series. Maybe next. We talk about I talk about 84 or 85 series because it seems only 2 articles actually is 70 articles in it, and the second one is about sustainable construction approach. The third is about the Green Road Program or Jalan Hijau and its implementation. And the last one is Appreciation Award for the proper implementation of sustainable construction. In implementing construction work, construction service providers and executors often do not realize the importance of sustainable construction. Considering this fact, appreciation award needs to be provided to construction parties to motivate them to implement the stages and principles of sustainable constructions. Awards are given to those that have been successful in meeting the 9 points of sustainable construction stated in Construction Safety Management System or SMKK, that's what we call it. Before proceeding further, let us discuss about green economy that became one of the discussion topics of ASEAN Summit, the G20 conference in Bali, and last time is in APEC Summit in Bangkok this past 2 weeks. Mr. Jokowi, our president, explained that the green economy is the potential future for the region economy. What is green economy? Green economy is an economic concept developed in the context of poverty alleviation and sustainable development. Green economy became one of the key themes in United Nations Conference of Sustainable Development in Rio in 2012, and a proper utilization of resources will support sustainable development. And experts say that green economy will not replace sustainable development, but there is a growing recognition that the achievement of sustainable development almost completely depend on economic improvement. I'm trying to correlate between the green economy, sustainable development, and also sustainable construction. To achieve this goal, sustainable construction plays an important role in the implementation of green economy and sustainable development, which became one of the discussion topics of G20 conference that has just been completed in Bali. Indonesia has started efforts to implement sustainable construction with the issuance of ministerial regulation number 05 in 2015. However, this regulation is not really easy to implement, so we have to revise it in 2020. And it was replaced by the government regulation of number 14, 2021. This regulation states that to create high quality infrastructures, we need to meet 3 points, which are complying with K4 standards. K4 or K4 means keamanan, keselamatan, kesehatan, dan keberlanjutan. In English is security, safety, health, and sustainability. And the second one is implementing during construction work measures for construction safety. And the third is implementing sustainable construction, which adopt 3 pillars as stated in Article 84, which is try to build a strong economy, which in turn improves in environment welfare. And the second one is sustainable construction is aimed at maintaining environment preservation. And the last one is the sustainable construction is aimed at reducing social disparity in community. The implementation of sustainable construction starts at the earliest stage, which is at the general planning phase and then at the programming phase. At these phases, we discuss a variety of options and designs that will be implemented. Results of processes of general planning and programming will be consulted with construction service providers and executors. At this stage, we need to determine ways on how to implement all the points stated in Construction Safety Management System, or SMKK, from the administration point of view to the final implementation, all of which cannot be separated from the other important point, which is the compliance with K4 standard. The implementation of sustainable construction is carried out through 4 stages, which are general planning, programming, construction consultation, and construction works. And all of the implementation of sustainable construction must meet 12 principles as stated in Article 84A until 84E, which are maybe I can, maybe next. Okay, next. Yeah, this is the stages that we want to apply sustainable construction. Next. Okay. Okay. Yes. This at the bottom you can see there are 12 principles of sustainable construction that must meet, which, for example, the first one is having the same goals. Why it's important? Because we have so many stakeholders that in actuality have a different point of view about construction, sustainable construction. And then the second one is a compliance with K4 standard, reducing the use of resources, reducing waste generation, reusing resources, and etc. And technological innovation is we are trying to endorse the BIM, and then also lean construction concept. And the last one is institutional support, leadership, and management. This one is also a very important point, principles that we have to be aware of, because many concepts or regulation in the past it did not have enough support from the management, so it won't in short, it's failed. Okay, and the principles above shows that the implementation sustainable construction, we need to use resources as effectively as possible and in such a way that the environment will not be damaged, and that environmental sustainability can be maintained. The resources that we are talking about is here comprise, among others, land, minerals, water, energy, and environmental ecosystems. Stages of the implementation sustainable construction are explained in details as I show it in the previous slides. Maybe next. Okay, this one is this is the criteria for sustainable construction. How we try to grade a project, whether it already implements sustainable construction concept or not. We try to grade it based on 4 criteria, which is technical criteria, environmental criteria, economic criteria, and social criteria. For social criteria, it requires that construction involves community participation, supports all genders, people with disabilities, and marginalized groups, support community interaction, and preserve local culture and wisdom. After discussing the stages and criteria of sustainable construction according to the government regulation, let us discuss the example of the implementation. One of those is Jalan Hijau or Green Road. This green road was based on the following approach, which is socially acceptable, economically viable, and environmentally sound. I said it was because this concept has renamed to Jalan Berkelanjutan or Sustainable Road in the past 2 years maybe. Why we changed the name, because there is a misconception that green road means only about the greening. So as we know that sustainable road is not only about greening, so we changed that name. So the program can be more aligned with the principles of sustainable construction and the 9 points of construction safety management system. The change to the new name also emphasized that the implementation of sustainable construction should focus not only to the current needs, but also on the needs of the future generation. Sustainable construction must use resources in such a way that the future generation will not experience resource depletion. Therefore, how the implementation of construction meets the point of construction safety management system and the quality assurance and quality control, or QAQC, we call it PMPM. That from the beginning of the project to the completion of the project, and it should be assessed by a relevant expert. And I would like to next. I would like to address some challenges that that we have to face to implement sustainable construction. The first is that we have a higher number of stakeholders. There are so many parties involved in construction works. These parties have different views and thoughts about the process of construction works. This has caused them to have difficulties in finding common ground on sustainable construction. The second one is a bureaucratic wall. Some habits and systems that do not promote sustainable construction have long been deep-rooted in the bureaucracy. We need to replace with the one that are in line with the principles of sustainable construction, although it is difficult to do so. The third is internal personnel. Another challenge is carrying out socialization that may have promote the awareness of personnel of the Ministry of Public Works and Housing on the importance of sustainable construction and encourage them to uphold its principle. The following annex. The following is one example of the lack of awareness of an irresponsible employee. For example, here, this is not in my place. This is in Mandalika, not Nusa Tenggara Barat. Some of the, well, maybe one of the labor, they don't really appreciate what this project doing, so they just move some of the flowers and stuff to his own yard maybe, and it's not only happen in bypass Mandalika, and it also happen in my place, North Sumatra. For example, we already plant like 200 trees, there's mango trees. mango trees. That's a mistake to plant mango trees, because in 1 week all of the mango trees disappear from the roads. And then, okay, this is what happened in, okay, disciplines, okay, forget about it later. And this one is the application of sustainable road technology, rubber asphalt technology. We also have this project in North Sumatra. This technology utilizes natural rubber, which is processed to be crumb rubber, and the crumb rubber is used as an asphalt modifier that work together with asbuton or asphalt buton or asphalt from Buton Island to affect the rheology, performance, and workability of asphalt mixtures in road pavement. Another application of sustainable road technologies utilize sand tailing aggregates for road pavement. Next. Sand tailing waste from the processing of gold and copper ores, and these tailings have not yet been utilized optimally. It's been experiment to apply this sand tailing in Kabupaten Timika, Papua Barat. Next. We do have some program in North Sumatra, for example, application of beautification of Tanoponggol Bridge. In this area, we try to make it more beautiful, in line with what our ministers would like to have, that our structure should be reliable, but also should be high quality, but also should be beautiful and also green. This is what we would like to apply in Tanoponggol, Samosir. Samosir is a very big lake. Maybe some of you maybe would like to visit Lake Samosir sometimes. Next. This is what we call it local cultures that we put in the as part of the beautification in that bridge. Next. Okay, next. It's just a map. Okay, next. 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 This project will finish maybe in March. Next. Okay, next. This one is a beautification for Balike bypass in Balike. Next. Okay, next. Next. Okay. This is a part of beautification in Mandalika bypass. Next. Okay, there is as I told you before, that we try to create appreciation awards. These appreciation awards are given in each of the stage. Actually, we have like 9 stages in construction services, like in pre-planning, design planning, assessment, or kajian, technical planning, or engineering. The other name is engineering, and then planning, and then construction implementation management, and then in supervision, and the next is construction work stage, and the last is different kind of construction services that we call integrated construction works. Next. Oh, there should be one more slides, but it's not there. That's okay. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much for your professional and persuasive presentation. I guess the policy is just the first step to move forward. So even though you have so many challenges around here, but you have wonderful policy, so I guess the sustainable construction in Indonesia will be successfully implemented soon. Okay. We have last presentation for session 1, and this presentation will be provided by virtually, and actually, okay. I'd like the title is Application of Information Intelligence for Better Disaster Management, and the speaker is Dr. Wei-Sen Li. He is currently Secretary Central of National Science and Technology for Disaster Reduction, Taiwan, leads international collaborations and conducts research on large-scale urban disasters and disaster risk management. Please invite Dr. Wei-Sen Li on screen. Okay, Dr. Wei-Sen Li, you may begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, due to my mission, right now I'm in Vietnam. But first of all, I want to give my sincere condolences to the affected people who suffered the impact from the earthquake recent date, which showed the importance of disaster risk reduction so important.
Dr. Wei-Sen Li.
Sorry, because my internet connection here is not very stable. I sent the video in advance. Is that possible? The organizer helped me to play the video first, then I will join the Q&A section, because the internet quality from time to time, good or bad, I cannot fully control about this. Sorry for the inconvenience to organizer and to all the audience, no matter on site or online.
So we need some time to make another connection.
Right now, we move to the next slide. Yes, I can share, because we think for the disaster risk management and to take actions, especially some definition by UNDRR. Disaster risk management, first, to apply disaster risk reduction policy and strategy for the several things in the following. First, about the new disaster risks. Second thing, reducing existing disaster risks. Last one, about residual risks for a disaster manager. Whenever we have new construction project, we should consider about some new risks. And meanwhile, like we have typhoon earthquake, is something we have to face challenges we consider existing risks. However, in case of large-scale disaster, which beyond our coping capacity, we should think about residual risks. But every measure we take is increase the resilience and reduce disaster losses. So we need action contributed by all society. Next slide, please. So, first of all, I emphasize about why information intelligence is so important. Because information doesn't do anything, but people respond by receiving quality information intelligence. This year, UNDR emphasized the early warning is a very important part around the world. So I will use this one cutting into my talk today. The type of early warning, I think first we're familiar with earthquake, it counts by second. Whenever we see the early warning, maybe you have maybe a 10 to 15 seconds to protect ourselves. Another one we also frequently face is about the typhoon. The scale will be counted by days or hours. But key element about the early warning system, including 4 elements: measurement, like the barometer, rain gauge, everything. Computing, when we see parameter which calculate its impact. And last one, how we use communication tool to send information intelligence to the target user. Last one, how we make them, no matter about decision maker or the general public, take action. So the purpose of early warning is to action for protection, decision on disaster impact, reduce impact, and response to the developing situation. But all the I mentioned about is early warning on physical vulnerability. However, for modern days, we just also think about how to have the comprehensive early warning system. So we should include some social vulnerability like the indigenous people mentioned by previous speaker. Next slide, please. So very important about integration, about whole key stakeholder. This is one example we have in Taiwan. Next time you have time to visit our base, I can be a guide, show you. We not just have the software information integration, we also have very important part about the operation integration. My office in the building, our National Emergency Operations Center at the 9th floor. In case of emergency, my office will become the 724, where this it already has order and also give some briefing. Next slide. I think this slide shows very important key stakeholders at EOC. First of all, my office will work with a lot of key stakeholders. They provide different parameters for early warning, like water resource agencies provide a lot of hydrometeorological parameters. About construction planning agency tell us about the situation about the drainage system, urban flood. National fire agency like a lot of the
We are apologize because the connection from Dr. Wei-Sen Li is very poor, and we try to connect it. So please just wait for a moment. Well, Mr. Jo, while we are waiting for the connection from Dr. Wei-Sen Li, it's better if we start to discuss.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, you're
Okay.
back. Good.
Sorry. I'm sorry for the inconvenience to organize everyone, but this is the destiny for a disaster manager. We all have a response to the emergency. Next slide, please. Actually, we work with the emergency responder. My office is kind of Science and Technology Research Institute. We try to provide impact about wind damage, storm surge, floods, landslide, and mudslide. We must tell the emergency responder about when, where, scare, and scope of impact. Responder can take some action, like deploy troops to help possibly affected area, or help early evacuation. And most important thing, they can deploy some equipment in case of flood. Next slide. Next. I'll give one example of our recent typhoon in Taiwan to show how we use the information intelligence for the decision maker at Central Emergency Operating Center. Next slide. This is case of this September. First of all, we try to integrate matter, satellite image, radar reflection, real-time rain gauge data, and total accumulated rainfall to show about rain concentration in certain area of Taiwan to highlight the possible area to receive impact. Next slide. Likewise, we also divide our information based on time and space. So we will divide in two phases. One is impacting time, another one is departure time. From the information, we'll tell local government about when and where to receive more precipitation, and where and how much the precipitation could be. Next, please. And also about the wind, dividing into two phases, because we think very important give kind of information by phases so the local government can understand and do some preparation in advance. The impacting phase and departuring phase. Next slide, please. And very important about flood. We also give a risk map of near real-time flood. On this slide, we identify the area could suffer flood in coming hours, and so they can make some preparation. Next one. This is very important related to highway. You see the green dots on the map in which the people live. So through the map, we can identify the highway linking the village could suffer interruption if landslide happen. So our information will show the possible risks to those highways could face the landslide, mudslide in coming hours. Next one. So we also highlight about the recent disaster and the possible impact. And lower left corner also show about rain data. This is one area in Pidong. Next slide. And also in Hsinchu. And you can tell from the slide that the rainfall could reach a threshold value in the midnight. So in that case, we might take some early evacuation to produce. We also have another example of Hsinchu City. They also say that next. Also in Hsinchu, also show where every have the report also show the high maintenance highway leading to the village, we need something in advance to reduce impact of tragedy to the people who live there. Next slide. So very important, we think my office provides science and technology, but those output we need some transformation to make them into understandable knowledge. At the EOC, our very important job is to interpret those knowledge to people's mind. For example, the decision maker. So also send the information to the general public so they can take action. We call it kind of life cycle of PR culture. Next slide. This is very important part. We think how we operate emergency in Taiwan. We want to combine 5 elements. DIKW, data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. But now we emphasize about action. For the starting point, my office provides some scientific prediction, but limited by the development of science and technology. So we increase a lot of real-time, more consistent to help update our information. So we provide the data and intelligence. In recent years, we also give them a lot of knowledge and wisdom, but most importantly, when we pass information to the end user, no matter decision maker or the general public, they can take action in time. So very important, we think decision making and application is most important action. So the key element for the disaster management succeed is integration of all kind of the sciences, no matter nature sciences or the social science, even engineering. And very important part, we try to use the innovation of science and technology and with the public-private partnership. Next slide, please. Thank you very much, and sorry for the inconvenience to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Wei-Sen Li. Well, actually, it is questionable, presentation despite of bad connection, and fully agree with you about the quality information is important, and innovation and integration is very key element for that quality information. I fully agree on that. Okay. So we now finished the session 1, but still have some maybe questions. Now we're going to have time to ask presenters questions. First, I'd like to ask you 1 or 2 questions from here, this room, and few of the questions from the online participants will be followed. So if you have questions at this room, please come forward and tell your name and organization. Please.
Bapak Ibu sekalian dapat mengajukan pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia dan nanti co-moderator kami akan mencoba untuk translate ke dalam bahasa Inggris.
Mr. Atip, that online question is prepared, is collected yet?
Yeah, he's going to ask the question.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Jo. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Lutfi. I'm from Directorate of Freeway, Directorate General of Highways, Ministry of Public Works and Housing. Thank you for the opportunity. In this occasion, I would like to ask a question to Mr. Brawijaya about his presentation on sustainable construction. As you said in your presentation, we have an implementation failure for implementing the ministry regulation year 2015, and then we changed the regulation to the government regulation in 2021. I would like to ask what are the lessons learned that we have learned in the failure of implementing the the ministerial regulation of 2015, and what are the steps that we need to take to make sure that the government regulation of 2021 will be succeeded in the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lutfi. About the lesson learned that we have from the previous regulation from 2019 is 2015 is that we cannot we have difficulties to convey this message to organization unit and even in the Ministry of Public Works and Housing. For that lesson, we elevate the regulator from ministerial regulation to government regulation or peraturan pemerintah. It means that it has more power to implement that regulation, not only to projects in the within the Ministry of Public Works and Housing, but also for all of the infrastructure projects. That's the first. And the second one is that, yes, we still have to establish a set of rules how to grade the projects, whether it's good enough to have like a gold award or silver award or not. However, we already learned from the previous one, which is from green buildings. Green buildings is quite successful. It's implemented based on the practice in the West, and we put it into a local context in Indonesia. It's quite successful, and we also want to spread this kind of awards into for dams, for roads. For roads we already give awards like twice in 2019 and 2020, I guess. But after that we have pandemic, so we have to see. We have to time will tell. But I'm quite optimistic with that this one will be successful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Okay, we have another questions over there.
Yes, Tim Sexton, Minnesota Department of Transportation in the United States. My question is for Mr. Stuart. You mentioned that the nationally in New Zealand, sorry, this thing is really low. Nationally, safety or climate change sort of has risen above safety as a priority in some ways, and maybe I misunderstood that, but there was some reference to sort of a reshuffling between safety and climate change. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that and any connections that are made between, especially by your executive director, by connections between climate and resilience and safety and how those might be coming together. Thank you.
There we go. To clarify the statement was made in terms of my chief executive of my agency made that comment in terms of
priority issues for the agency rather than as a whole of government statement. Notwithstanding, the whole of government has been turning its mind very heavily to climate change, both mitigation and adaptation, and is spending a lot of time in government agencies redressing and focusing on that, particularly with the legislative agenda. So we're, for example, rethinking our National Emergency Management Act, our Resource Management Act, which is the land use type of act, so that it can address things like managed retreat. In terms of the safety comparison, for many years, road safety was the #1 issue because of the damage to life and limb and property. It's not to say that it's falling off the agenda, it was just that with the government focusing on climate change and the climate change emergencies being announced all over the place, that she believed in terms of the priorities for my organisation that climate change was going to be the preeminent one, but not ignoring other ones in terms of road safety, value for money, placemaking, multimodal innovation, etc. And in terms of the relationship, I guess it's a discussion that's still occurring, but to my mind it's very clear that climate change is a subset of the wider natural hazard resilience suite, given that it's a changing of the climate hazard being part of the hazard suite alongside geological hazard, anthropomorphic hazard, etc. And in terms of the connection to road safety, yes, I do also see that there is an overlap in areas of road safety with resilience, primarily in terms of the impact on the availability of the transport system. They each have their interest areas outside the overlap, but it is much like a Venn diagram. There is an overlapping area of interest. Thank you.
We have 5 minutes for this session. So, Mr. Atip, please show me that online questions here. Okay.
Okay, to Mr. Swat, in the climate adaptation plan, do you have any activities that include climate change related disaster mitigation plan that is embedded into road asset management, embedded in road asset management? Is there any related to disaster mitigation plan?
Yep, great question. In New Zealand, a lot of our thinking around climate change is allocated to the two different aspects of climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. The work I'm working on in our resilience space is very much focused on the latter, the climate change adaptation. But that is playing catch up to the climate mitigation, emissions reduction work that had much more attention and was making early progress in the space of electric vehicles, multimodal, reducing VKT, and all of those types of things. So the mitigation work is much further advanced. It is being run on a separate pathway in terms of a lot of the thinking and the tool development and the measurements. But they are also recognised and they are managed in the agency under a single portfolio of climate change at the moment, just with different legs within that portfolio. And some of the work that is in that space does relate to road asset management and particularly construction. Our major construction projects, for example, which are over $50 million, must have an in-depth analysis of the carbon budgets that are involved to minimise concrete construction, the transport of materials to site, the amount of water that's being used and the like. So yes, it is done. I just didn't speak to it today because it's a slightly separate issue in the way that we've managed our work programs.
I think this is the end of this session. Thank you for the speakers, and thank you for the listening. Thank you.
Thank you, the speakers and moderator, for this session. Next session is Building Capacity for Adaptation and Resilience, Economic, Social, and Environmental. The speakers for this session, Mr. Nkululeko Leta from the Independent Expert South Africa and also member of PRTC 1.4. And Mr. Leta is joining us online. Mr. Piotr Chalka from the Ministry of Transportation of Poland. Mr. Chalka is also joining us online. Also, Mr. Imam Aschuri from National Technology Institute of Indonesia and Ms. Dini Kus Andiani from the Ministry of Public Works and Housing of the Republic of Indonesia. And the moderator for this session is Mr. Hendarto. Mr. Hendarto is a senior engineer at Implementation Unit for Geotechnics, Tunnels and Structures in Road Construction Technical Planning Subdirectorate, the Ministry of Public Works and Housing of the Republic of Indonesia. We would like honorably to invite to the podium our moderator, Mr. Hendarto.
Oke. Tes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Director General of Highway and Board of Directors, and also the member from PIREX and REAAA, and also delegates from Indonesian Road Development Association and our speakers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Hendarto. I work for Ministry of Public Works at the Directorate of Bridge Constructions, and it is my great honor to stand in front of you to be a moderator for this session. So today, topic we are going to talk about the climate change, resilience, and disaster management for roads. As we know that Indonesia is located in a very vulnerable location in terms of the natural disasters. And also, we have so many infrastructure developments up to now. As you can see this morning, our minister has explained to you not only roads, but also dams, bridges, buildings, and many more. And then those infrastructure are very, very serious, designed by our engineers to have the resilience infrastructure and etc. So today's session will talk about the building capacity for adaptations and resilience. As we are one of the stakeholders in the infrastructure development, so we have responsibilities to construct safer roads for all generations. So we will have 3 speakers. 2 will deliver their presentation online, and 1 is here. He will be present directly in front of you. So before the presentation begins, let me tell you how the session will begin. First, each speaker has 15 minutes. Then, after that, the session will be continued for the second and the third speakers. Then we will have a question and answer for the remaining time of the session 2. Ladies and gentlemen, first I'd like to read a brief introduction to our speakers. Mr. Nkululeko Leta from South Africa. He will deliver about the approach that government road agencies in low and LMICs can adopt to work enhance adaptive capacity. And he also the member of the PRTC 14. Mr. Leta, are you with us now?
Yes, yes, I am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can clearly.
So the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes to deliver your presentations. Time is yours now.
Okay, thank you. If you could please load my presentation. I assume it's on its way. Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for giving me opportunity to make a presentation. The title of the presentation is, as indicated on the first slide. This is basically a proposal based on the experiences in a number of LMICs, particularly from sub-Saharan Africa, and their feedback on how to approach their climate adaptation endeavors. So next slide, please. My presentation will look at a number of elements that have come clearly through from discussions with these countries on how best to approach the climate change adaptation endeavors. Some of these elements are currently being developed and will be part of the climate adaptation framework that is currently being developed. So without much further ado, I'll start with the elements of defining the baseline and then also creating a structure that will manage the climate adaptation program. There's also need for development within the roads agency or within the government structure. You may be aware that currently in a lot of countries, in LMICs, the climate adaptation program is being done in an ad hoc manner, which results in a lot of missed opportunities and wasted resources because there is no proper structure to plan, manage, and implement climate adaptation measures. So the baseline itself outlines the introductory work that needs to be done before initiating an assessment of vulnerability. So there are introductory tasks that will help road administration to decide on what kind of adaptation work they would like to do or to be most appropriate to do. And there are criteria as well for defining baseline for adaptation. in terms of what the ambitions and perceived outcomes of an assessment should be, and how these ambitions suit the existing knowledge, resources, and established relations within a particular context, particularly also the actual physical state of the road network. It will also define what the societal values that need to be maintained and protected through effective adaptation work. Next slide, please. So I've highlighted a number of questions that the process of defining the baseline will be looking at. They would, for instance, these are not comprehensive at all, but they indicate what priorities or where the priorities should be, the attention on priorities should be made. What is the nature of the vulnerability and the perceived risk, the question that needs to be answered during this process? Which assets, locations, and operations are deemed the most important or valuable and have already been impacted by climate effects? What needs to adapt, and what are the processes in play? And what are the potential costs and benefits of adaptation? What implementation methods and resources are being used or could be used? And what are the sources of climate data? What are the constraints, barriers, implementation of adaptation actions? What capacity exists? So it is important. The next slide, please. So it is important to be able to have a clear idea of what the context in a particular environment is, or in a country is, and then define the priorities from there. And as I said earlier, there needs to be a structure, a national climate change structure that will engage stakeholders in terms of defining the baseline and agreeing on a baseline and priorities for climate change adaptation. So some of the key objectives or main purpose of this structure will be to identify and mobilize stakeholders and partners because climate adaptation needs to be done in a holistic manner that avoids duplication and exclusion. Importantly, setting of climate policy objectives and scope needs to be done at a national level. It needs to foster pathways towards mainstreaming climate change adaptation into government's planning policies, plans, processes, and systems. And it's important also to note that climate change adaptation is a long-term national commitment. So it's got to be defined and structured in such a way that that process goes on and there is a national outlook in terms of what needs to be done. For example, adaptation needs and prioritizations for interventions, they also need to be defined at the national level. Clearly, there is a very important role for the roads agencies because they will take on from the decisions that come from the national climate change governance structure and proceed with implementation. Mobilization of adequate resources for adaptation, and they have to be done also at a timely manner. And importantly, the sharing of state of knowledge of climate change science, data, and experiences, because this is a very fast developing area of endeavor that needs constant renewal. Next slide, please. And this is just a list of key institutions that need to form part of this steering structure: the meteorological services, disaster management services, the local, the national and local roads agencies, local communities that are in the affected areas also need to be part and parcel of this process. And it really has to be multi-sectorial, multidisciplinary, and cross-sectoral structure that will cover all partners and ensure coordination and collaboration. Next slide, please. The slide is not coming through. I think you may need to check if some of the slides are not hidden, because it looks like that was the end of the... If you could restart the slide from the next one, please. I don't know if it's possible. I could share it from my end. So I could keep going whilst this is being organized.
Mr. Leta, are you going to add more presentations, or this is the end? Because,
no,
this is the end.
No, it's not the end. I think some of the slides are hidden. So
yeah, it's on my e-note that you still have a few slides, but it seems that
yes,
you hide some files. Then we cannot see anything in here. So do you want to upload it, or please unhide your files, your slides, maybe the 3 or 4 slides, and then you can upload it again. So we are waiting. So this is done. You have 5 minutes more. Don't worry about it.
Well, I would have thought that would have been sorted out, because I raised it earlier. But anyway, I don't know if you can see the slide that I'm sharing now.
Oh no, I'm sorry. It is okay now. Please unhide the slide and you can slideshow.
Yeah, so please just confirm when they actually come through. Or I could just go through them, maybe, because it says I'm sharing already. Okay, let me just continue. So going straight from the structure, it is important that capacity development of at both institutional and personal level is carried out to enable the roads agencies to be able to implement climate change adaptation practices in an effective manner. The key elements for climate change adaptation or capacity development include embedment of climate change adaptation into the road management system, because this will ensure continuity and consistency in the implementation of these adaptation measures. And it allows also for testing, trialing, monitoring, and evaluating the performance of adaptation measures for further refinement and improvement. Development of standards for climate change resilient infrastructure is also underpinned by research and development. That has to be done at an institutional level within roads agencies. So this capacity development also can be done at 2 different levels. Firstly, at the target groups, which are practitioners in both public and private sectors who have the day-to-day responsibility of planning, designing, implementing, and managing the climate change adaptation measures. It also has to be at a senior level, senior government officials and policymakers from across all relevant sectors for the effective buy-in and ownership in uptake. So the prioritization also of adaptation measures is very important, and that has to happen in an open and transparent manner. So the installation of any measures will require prioritization based on a business case, a more complex situation, or a simple cost-benefit analysis, for example, at a local level, be done to find these priorities. Some of the key questions that can be asked include, is it a responsive adaptation intervention that is after a specific event? Is it a proactive adaptation intervention in advance of a specific climate event? Or is it a flexible action that could be adjusted in the future? Is it robust action that takes into consideration multiple climate events? So the process of prioritization is also an important one that ensures that only the most critical elements of an asset, or even if it's a whole asset, are addressed initially at the very beginning and as a priority. And of course, some of the factors that need to be considered are the potential loss of life, the availability of alternative routes or accessibility requirements need to be considered, the cost and consequences of any closure, if it's a road or a bridge, what will be the consequences thereof? What are the costs for the repair, and what are the available funds that can be applied for that particular measure? So all these factors and more need to be considered. I think one of the key challenges that most countries in the LMICs have confronted is the poor planning for post-event recovery efforts. So the above 4 points that I've indicated will go a long way towards enhancing the adaptive capacity, and as a result, ensure that an effective post-event recovery process for the benefit of affected communities is done. The World Bank says financing adaptation strategies will be more effective, will be more cost-effective than financing crisis responses to more frequent and severe climate shocks. So it is important that adaptation strategies are properly prioritized and implemented, and as a result will have less impact post these events. I think we know of all the examples this year of adverse climatic events. And what I would like to highlight from this, I mean, we know the drought and famine in the Horn of Africa, catastrophic floods in Durban and Nigeria, and deadly heat waves in North Africa. So some of the common traits that contributed to the adverse impact on local communities include ineffective response to early warning systems where they exist. And admittedly, a lot of countries do not have these early warning systems. So they are less protected and they're less able to respond effectively to these events. The lack of response preparedness by authorities due to poor coordination and collaboration among stakeholders. And obviously we know there are some events that are just too overwhelming for local disaster management capacities. So these would then have to be addressed through mitigation efforts, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. And there's always a lack of adequate resources and technical capacity for both adaptation and recovery. And finally, just a number of recommendations that I would put across to countries that are embarking on this climate adaptation process. There has to be resources immediately available for emergency assistance during adverse climate events and for post-recovery interventions. The safety of communities and protection of their lives and livelihoods will be paramount in the recovery efforts. Prioritization of interventions is essential for optimal use of resources to avoid wastage. And monitoring and evaluation of effectiveness of adaptation measures through a robust institutional R&D capacity is essential for continuous refinement and improvement of interventions. So I believe that a progressive and a consistent application of the above points that I've raised in my presentation will help LMICs to at least begin to put a structure, institutional setup to be able to deal effectively with the climate effects, both through adaptation measures and post-recovery assistance to those affected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Give applause to Mr. Leta. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to the second presenter, Mr. Chalka. Dzień dobry. Do you hear can you hear us here?
Yes, yes, of course. Can you hear
Dzień dobry. Good. Okay.
Dzień dobry.
So let me introduce about him in a bit. So actually Mr. Chalka is Polish nationality, 37 years old, born in Warsaw. And he has master's degree in public administration, in civil engineering degree in road administration in 2008. So he is now the head of division since 2016. He the head of division for crisis management and security. Division duties are military preparedness, road information point, tunnel safety, center, IT team, and the ITS in the Warsaw. So the second speakers will talk about the gathering, managing information in terms of crisis management in administering road infrastructures in Poland. Mr. Chalka, time is yours, 15 minutes.
Thank you very much for that very nice introduction. It's really nice to be a part of this seminar. A little bit tired because I worked late hours. We've been doing some maintenance works in a tunnel. We try to do it when the traffic is the lowest, that means night. It's quite early here. I'm right after a nice cup of coffee, which I hope will get me going. So let's come to the chase. Little bit of history first. I would like to start with a little bit of history, which is a background for what I'm going to tell you next. Everything that happened in recent history of Poland determines everything now, but that's also for the road infrastructure. In 1999, we ceased a socialist country and began a new era of democracy, but also meant changing into free market economy. During a socialist era, we rather didn't used to build roads, and the government assumed people wouldn't have a lot of private cars. And everything changed dramatically in 1989. Industry was growing, private companies would develop rapidly, people started buying cars, and rising economy needed roads. Also, Poland slowly but gradually would become a transit country due to the rising European economies. Another game changer was joining European Union in 2004, and structural funding would start. That meant a start of great road infrastructure development. What that also meant is that we actually become seriously building roads about 2007. We especially accelerated in building high-speed roads, as Poland needed new corridors for internal and transit transportation. In quite a short time, we built a lot to make up for lost time. In general, Poland is 38 million people country. We have about 4,700 kilometers of high-speed roads. What means that we're a little bit farther than halfway through with building our high-speed road grid. We currently have about 100 investment projects in construction and about that much in preparation. Also about 90 smaller ones, which are mostly ring roads. Can you hear me? Okay, am I? Just let me know if I'm connected. Okay, great.
Mr. Chalka, are you okay?
Oh, okay, can you hear me? Okay, okay.
Very clear.
So and okay, where are we? Oh, here. Okay, so Poland's administration is divided into regions, and also General Directorate for National Roads and Motorways, which I work for, is divided into regional divisions. Here is the region. Here on the map, you can see the region of Mazovia, the biggest one, with capital city of Warsaw, also the biggest national roads infrastructure in Poland and highest traffic volumes. We have about 2,900 kilometers of national roads, from which about 500 are high-speed roads. Traffic volumes vary from 2,000 even to 190,000 automobiles per day. We also have 2.3-kilometer tunnel located on an expressway, which is part of South Bypass of Warsaw. moment given, not something that we would design and apply over years. That solution needed to secure ability to gather, process, and disseminate information from various sources, and that could operate 24/7. It was too early for building sophisticated automatic systems that could detect an accident and respond automatically, because building such systems needs years, sometimes many years. So our solution, we needed something proper for that time, for a stage of evolution of our road infrastructure, and for the stage of knowledge and abilities of our organization. We needed something we were able to apply, not something we would only dream on. The solution was to establish a new kind of team in our organization that would work shifts 24/7 of trained operators that would be able to contact our road maintenance contractors and keep them reacting properly. That would be able to reach fire department or police at any time in case of problems on roads, but also be able to respond to those authorities when they contact us. This team is called in Polish Punkt Informacji Drogowej, in short PID, what means road information point. So you can see how it works in short, so let's stay with PID. In short, you can see an operator in the middle, our source of information. Operators gather information from various sources, like road users, drivers, reporting problems mostly by smartphones, but we treat their information cautiously because in many cases they could mislead us. Like, for example, report problems on local roads, which are not under our responsibility. We'd try to confirm what they would tell us to be sure. There are, of course, media and internet, which we try to follow. We also use weather stations and road CCTV. We have about more than 200 cameras in Mazovia region. Those are very useful during winter time. Then fire and police department, trained professionals. We rather trust their information. They know what kind of information we need to do our job, fast, specific details. There are our maintenance contractors, a valuable source of information, especially because they're patrolling. They do patrols of our roads. They check our roads constantly. And there are also our employees. Information we record about road accidents, traffic jams, obstructions, roadworks, and so on are presented on our webpage. But also information that we gather and process are provided on web services like, for example, Google Maps. So information about, for example, accidents are collected from our software by many internet services. So they can be disseminated better. So about our team, it used to look like this. That's PID of our PID is part of division that I'm head of. We used to look like this in our old office. Now we're in new location, which looks like this. In this location, we have developed this team, and now we're also a tunnel safety center. So this team covers 2 fields of duty now. We're still developing it. So what's next? We're developing mostly in the field of intelligent transportation systems. Besides duties of PID, we supervise tunnel safety, but in about a year, we're going to launch Regional Traffic Management Center. Also, in a few years, there will be 2 more tunnels to operate and supervise. So we'll be quite a team in some time, specializing in information management, operating ITS, and tunnel safety. I'm sure most of you will agree that properly that to properly manage crises or disasters on roads, we need to manage information properly. It's about quick response, knowing what to do, when to do, how to settle contact channels with partners in emergency situation. And that's, we try to cover all those fields as best as we can. And all of that is to answer a great demand for ability to travel safely and comfortably in Poland. By the way, this in this picture, you can see entrance to the tunnel we operate, and this sign on VMS board says segmental speed measurement. So that's all for me. Thank you very much. And if you happen to be in Poland, let me know and pay me a visit. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind the two speakers, Mr. Leta and Mr. Chalka, please remain in the online there. So we will have a question and answer at the end of these sessions. So, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite the third speaker, Imam Aschuri. Academic staff at the National Institute of Technology. He has a bachelor's degree from Brawijaya University in 1990. And then he got his master's degree from ITB in 1993 and graduated from the PhD program at University of Ulster in UK in 2007. He's currently active as academic staff at ITENAS, or National Institute of Technology in Bandung, since 1993. So he will be delivering about the slope management system for preventive solutions of slope failure. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the first author. The second author is Dini Kus Andiani from the implementation unit of Balai Geotechnic, Tunnel and Structures in Bandung. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on board by Imam Aschuri. Zoom is yours. Sorry, online platform in wherever you are, and also ladies and gentlemen in this ballroom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for the time to do my presentation. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Good afternoon, everybody. Before I would like to share my paper or my topics, I would like to thank you for the Dr. Nyoman Suarsana, because he always support us collaboration, research collaboration, slope management system for preventive solution of slope failure in Indonesia. Okay. This is a research collaboration with Mrs. Dini Kus Andiani. Please stand up. Okay, thank you. Okay. Talk about disaster. I believe all audience know about Indonesia. Indonesia is the one of the most country has a potential disaster, natural disaster. According to World Bank data, Indonesia placed 12 ranks in 12 ranks from 35 the most countries of potential disaster, natural disaster. Okay, and then we all know that the main problem landslides. I think all audience know about that. The two main the factor cause the landslide. The first is water. Like Minister said, yeah, in the morning, the opening speech, the water, and water. So I want to, we can see the picture, yeah? The relationship between rainfall maximum or and every years rainfall maximum in Indonesia about the average about 272 millimeter per day. This is very, very high, I mean. Okay, next. Okay, and then inland with the rainfall, we can see that from the picture, rainy season, so the landslide inland with the rainy season. So we can see that the landslides are higher than dry season. Yeah, it means that the water is the main problem. And the early rainy season is still low, and then after that rainy season, the landslide is very high. Next. Okay, this is one example, the case, heavy rains caused landslide in Puncak, West Java province. 5th February 2018 at 9:25 o'clock, had the accident, yeah, atau landslide problem in Puncak, West Java, because the rainfall on 4 and 5 February about 152 millimeter per day. But still the lower the average rainfall maximum in Indonesia. But the duration is a long time rainfall happen. So that's why landslide happen because the heavy rains. Next. This is the other case. Yeah, the landslides cause earthquake in Lombok. Yeah, that's people die about 105 people. That's a terrible. And then the epicenter located at the 18-kilometer northwest Lombok, Timur, Regency, at a depth of 15 kilometers. Strong magnitude 7 earthquake hit Lombok, Bali, Sumbawa, and eastern part of Jawa Timur. BMK that had activated the tsunami warning for the northern part of Lombok Timur and Lombok Utara, atau North Lombok. Tsunami was detected in some places with the water level ranging from 2 to 13, 0.5 centimeter with very minimum impact. So the tsunami warning was ended on August 5, 2018 at 8 o'clock in the PM. Next. Okay, this is the different case too. Example in the Dompu Regency NTB, yeah. There's a landslide effect because the fracture material and erosion. Yeah, so we have three cases here, but the fracture material and erosion should be caused by water too, because the weathered rock fall. Okay, this is the action plan and landslide countermeasure work, and then long action about 800 meter, cost estimation about 20 billion, yeah, 20 billion, yeah. Okay, in order to slope maintenance and landslide management to be programmed and targeted, it is necessary to assess a slope condition and estimate the cost of slope mitigation. So that's why from the previous description, three cases, we need the slope management. Next. Yeah, this is road slope management have developed by Directorate of Road and Bridge Engineering Development. There are 5 guidance. Yeah. The road slope management consists of, the first is slope inventory, and then slope inspection, slope risk rating, and then slope maintenance. The last one is cost program. So the cost program is not finished, but still doing developed. And then the slope inventory, slope inspection, and slope risk rating, and slope maintenance we have done. Okay. And okay, thank you. This is slope inventory. We have to collect data. The initial data road slope is about general slope data, geometry, topography, geology, drainage, pavement and road shoulder, countermeasure, and of course about the location in terms of rainfall intensity. Next. Okay, this is the guidance of slope inspection. Inspection of slope condition on the road to determine the performance of the slope and countermeasure. The slope inspection consists of 3 categories. The first is routine inspection, periodical inspection, and emergency inspection. Next. After that, the road inventory and slope inspection, we can calculate it. We can calculate risk estimation. We adopted Malaysia. We adopt the Malaysia standard, and the value of risk rating depend on the H and G. What is H? Value of risk rating, R is of level of risk rating is divided 4 categories. The first is low, moderate, high, and very high. And then value of rating is R, is less than the 50, 50 to 65 is moderate, and 69 to 75 is high, and the higher to 75 is very high. So the slope maintenance based risk estimation, we can we can calculate for level 2. The first is if the level of risk rating low, we can do routine maintenance. And moderate rehabilitation. High is rehabilitation and instrumentation. Very high is reconstruction. Next. That's after we can calculate the risk, we can plot to the map. So we can we have a road slope risk map in Indonesia. That's this dashboard from I think is information system of slope like this. We can see the road slope risk map, and then level of risk. Every region we can see to the dashboard. Next. Okay, so it's the slope maintenance is depend on the risk, yeah, the level of risk. Very high risk is reconstruction, high risk rehabilitation and instrumentation. Moderate risk is rehabilitation. Low risk is routine maintenance. This is the guidance, but still in Indonesia. Next. This is just example. Road slope condition is Java. Type of slope dominate cut slope, yeah, 41%. Natural slope is 31%, and embankment slope is 27%. And then the description, landscape, vegetation, length of slope about 23 to 1,100 meter, height of slope 5 to 100 meter, angle of slope 20 to 90 degrees. Next. That's the result. We can conclude that the road slope condition in East Java, that's dominated collapse. Yeah? The landslide is about collapse, and then about reach of road slope dominated is moderate. Yeah, about 67.5%. And then high is just 6.3%. Next. Okay, this is just example 2. That's a slope inventory. Okay, that's natural slope, length of slope 100, height of slope 49, angle of slope 55 degree. Geology, mixed material. More 60% soil, upper part soft rock, low part hard rock, conspicuous of withered, culvert, collapse, and then the angle beta is 33 degrees. Okay. Next. That's after slope inspection, and then we can calculate risk rating. And this risk is moderate. That's risk is very high. So very high should be reconstruction. Next. This is reconstruction is very high because it's reconstruction. That's yeah. And next. Okay. That's the same, but the different area. I think I just passed because it's same. Next. That's the same way. after the inspection, and then we can calculate the risk rating. After that, we can do slope maintenance. Yeah. That's retaining wall. Yeah. Okay. Okay, next. Okay, the concluding remarks, the Indonesia is a country that has high landslide potential. The second, the Director General of Highway, Ministry of Public Works and Housing of Indonesia has developed a road slope management system. Road slope management system guidelines include inventory, inspection, risk assessment, slope maintenance, and cost program. The fourth is validity of slope condition data collection is an important factor in the road slope management system. So that's why Directorate of Road and Bridge Engineering Development still develop how to validity and the accuracy of data before input the system. Five, still doing develop IT-based road slope management system, doing develop of landslide potential risk map, and the last one is landslide risk map will be used as the basis for development of preventive program for slope maintenance in Indonesia. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pak Imam. Ladies and gentlemen, all the presenters have delivered their presentations, and I would like to recall Mr. Leta and Mrs. Chalka. Wherever you are, please be online. So we would like to have the Q&A sessions. So what we have now is the data that you have seen previously presented by Pa Imam are mostly managed by Directorate of Technical Affairs for Roads and Bridges under Pa Director Nyoman. And also in particular, the data is managed by the implementation unit of geotechnics, tunnel, and structures. So we have around 15 minutes. So I would like to offer this session to all of you, the attendants here. And later on, if there is no attendants would like to ask more, so I would like to ask the committee to choose one or two questions from the online participants. So now is your sessions. Please raise your hand, mention your name and your institutions. So time is yours. Anyone? Anyone from the floor has questions? From my left side, any question? The first row, sorry, for the first columns on the left, the most left, any questions? This next, the second column, you have any questions? The second columns, any questions? No? Okay, next, the third one, here. Any questions? So everything looks like on the correct place. On that fourth one, please. Yes, one question, please. Stand and walk forward to the mic. Name and institution and to whom you are going to ask, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm asking to Mr. Chalka. The first one is, as we know that technology has massive disruption into our lives. So it enables us to create something like collaborative and digital environment, including infrastructures solutions. So that it will be create the services with the conceptions of always connected between the regulators, users, emergency services, and public services. So those collaborative services as collaborative technology which create as called digital solutions to support high quality infrastructures. So what's the strategy and applied in Poland to create such collaborative solutions into public services, particularly for the infrastructures? So the second one is I would like to ask the extent to that solutions are able to provide a better life for the citizens, for the folks, and finally increasing the satisfaction levels against the services to the peoples in the country. Thank you. My name is Widya Praja. I'm from PT Adikarya. Thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Okay, so I would like to recall Mr. Chalka. You have the question from Widya from Adikarya, yeah? So, Mr. Chalka, you are with us. Are you?
Thank you. Yes, yes, I'm here.
So, can you hear the question from the floor here?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. A very interesting question. Thank you for that. The topic you mentioned is quite complicated, very important also. Of course, I will answer it very shortly. So the strategy of Poland is mostly focused on ITS systems, on the development of intelligent transportation systems. We have a national project. It's the first stage of building equipment on our roads. The main part is a central part, which consists not only of the equipment on the roads, but also it has central software systems that will connect all of the regional projects. There are currently 5, as I remember, 5 regional projects. They are all interoperated, and the whole idea is to be able to easily develop the systems, the ITS systems, throughout the whole infrastructure of the national roads. The other part of the strategy is on our every infrastructural projects of when we build new corridors, we also build parts of ITS systems, so we can connect all of the parts of the infrastructure. Of course, it will happen in few years. So this is, in a nutshell, a strategy. The other part of your question, I would say, I personally think that on one side of the topic, we need to take care of the safety on our roads, and ITS systems, I believe, can be a very useful tool to do that, especially it means especially ability to inform road users about accidents, obstructions, and so on. And they let us do it in a very quick way. The response is much quicker than any other sources we tend to use now. The other part of the topic is to allow road users not only to travel safely, but also to travel comfortably. So, of course, there will be some problems on roads, especially due to high traffic volumes. But as long as we can provide good information for road users, so they can, for example, take detours, is part of providing this comfort of traveling. So, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Pak Widya, hopefully you are satisfied with Chalka's answer. So I'd like to offer you again any question from the floors. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Gordana Petkovic from Norwegian Public Roads Administration. I have a comment or a question to Mr. Leta, if he's still here. And we do work in the same technical committee of PRC 1.4, but I thought there's something that maybe the broad audience could benefit from hearing a bit more about, and that is this idea of a national steering committee for, among other things, climate change adaptation. So my question is, who is supposed to take initiative for such a steering committee? Is that a top-down action? Is it difficult to implement? What is the communication between the professionals who can carry out the decisions and the decision makers that need advice from the professionals to be able to ask for action? Could you say something more about that?
Thank you very much. So, yeah. Mr. Leta.
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks, Gordana, for the question. I think what the experience from a number of countries with respect to setting up these national steering committees is that they usually take advantage of existing committees that discuss various issues and involving the same or most of the same stakeholders. So what happens is they add on the agenda issues related to climate adaptation, and then they are discussed and then decisions taken. But some countries have set up separate institutional structures with a view to ensuring that that structure is not distracted by other issues, particularly those countries that have suffered a lot from these adverse climatic events. They feel it's justified to have a separate committee at the highest level, also including government ministers and senior officials, to ensure that the issues pertaining to climate adaptation or climate change in general, not just adaptation, are properly addressed. The requisite policies are put in place, and the resources that are required to drive those actions are also put in place. So it's a different, or it varies slightly from country to country. But once that national steering committee is in place, then as the term indicates, it's a steering committee. Then you need an executive committee, which then comes from the roads agencies themselves, who will then take on from the directives from that steering committee. By the way, they also take part in those steering committees as the secretariat. And all decisions that emanate from the committees for implementation by the roads agencies as an executive arm of that structure. So that one seems to be the one that works reasonably well, because the link, for example, the steering committee could meet like once or twice or even 3 times a year, whereas the executive committee is a day-to-day implementer and based on the guidance from the steering committee. So those decisions and even this institutional setup for implementation resides within the roads agencies or roads authorities. So, and then the rest of the action is based on that. I hope that answers your question, but if there's anything I haven't addressed, kindly remind me, then I can respond appropriately.
Hopefully everything is clear. Then I would like to offer the third. Any question from the floor for the third one, please? Okay, so afternoon, no one. So committee, have you choose the question from the online participants? If not, I would like to give a question to Pa Imam. Pa Imam just presented many slope stability problems in Indonesia. So just wondering about the countermeasures that usually apply by our consultants, which is the implementation of the constructions by using the bore piles. So is this like the one for all for ones? Just give the bore piles and that's it. The safety factor will increase and so on. Do you have any insight on it? Is this true about that one, or do you have any other opinion? Thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator. Okay, but actually we don't have in line with the value of risk with the number. I think what is the number based on? What is the number?
There is another question. Okay.
Okay. Okay. The risk ranking depend on 2 factors. The first is hazard level. That's H, and the R. R is hazard level, and then consequence atau impact. 0.9 with time to hazard level plus consequence level. That's the formula we can we adopt Malaysian standard, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Please pop up again the question from the online one. Anyone? Any question from the floor? Mr. Aschuri, can you explain the value of risk rating? What is the number based on? Is it like some subjective, or is easy to follow by
that's
engineers?
Subjective, because so that's why the inspection or we have requirement. It means the inspector should be has 5 years experience, I think. So, so that's subjective.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is important things to do. So send a good inspectors, and then we will have a good number. Any other question from online participants? If not, I would like to ask the Chalka. So since we have 5 minutes more. Mrs. Chalka, the ITS system that you propose and you're using in Poland, is it highly dependent on the a good connections, internet connection between one point to others? Or if you, do you have any problem with it, and what is the solutions? Thank you very much. Chalka, you are with us?
Oh yes, I'm having a little bit trouble with connections. Can you please repeat the question?
You said that you are connecting 5 ITS in, for example, in one of your cases in there. So my question is that system highly depending on good connections? I mean, in terms of the internet connection, for examples. I know what is the backup if the failures occurs? That's my question.
Yes, definitely it is dependable on the good internet connection. Part of the national project and regional projects is building the specific wiring for that connections. Let me check only one thing so I can answer you better. The whole idea is to connect every project with a specific optical fibers grid. Well, we mean building there these connections. I would say nationwide. Yes. And what's the backup? Probably part of internet providers optical fibers grid. So that's it. Yeah.
Maybe, I'd like to offer one more session. Okay, if not, I'd like to ask Leta. So we would like to ask Mr. Leta from South Africa. So you said that you have an experience in the low, middle income countries in applying or implementing the building capacity for climate change, resilience, and disaster management. Do you have any specific difficulty in terms of communications from one country to others? Because there are so many low, middle income countries in the world. So perhaps in your territory and in Africa, for example, would you mind to share that difficulty experiences in your career? Please, thank you very much.
Okay. If I understand the question correctly, you're asking about difficulties in communications between countries with respect to addressing climate adaptation impacts. Is that the question? Is that the question, or I can assume it is?
Make a good communication in one country and which probably different from other countries' conditions.
Oh, I see. Yes, I think because these national steering committees they meet not too often, so you find that the attendance is very high at these events. And a lot of decisions, good decisions are made. And those decisions are also communicated not only to the institutions represented there, but they're communicated to other stakeholders that may not have been involved. For example, if they are going to determine climate change policy, it cannot just sit with the steering committee. It's got to be translated into a national priority, and there are government communication channels that divulge policies, especially in this regard. And because these policies need to be implemented, all the relevant organizations that have to implement these policies have to take it up and implement as required. The only communication channel that has been a bit of a concern has been communicating from national level to the local levels, to the affected parties, to the local authorities that manage the road networks or that manage other assets that are that are impacted on by these adverse climate events. And that has always been a bit of a challenge that requires addressing. And as you could see, that ideally the steering committee requires participation of local communities, affected communities, but that process has not worked that well. As a result, sometimes it takes the shape and characteristic of a top-down approach, which, as we all know, does not produce the required results. So a lot of effort has been made, especially where there are decentralization policies in place in countries. Those are more effective at communicating at local level than those that rely on national communication channels.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give applause to all the presenters. Mr. Leta from South Africa, Mr. Chalka from Poland, and Mr. Imam Aschuri and Budini from Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attentions, and we do apologize if we have something not really good in delivering these sessions. We do apologize, and enjoy the rest of your seminar in Yogyakarta, the beautiful city and one of the beautiful places to stay. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Ministry of Public Works, we thank you to you all, and God bless you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hendarto, Mr. Leta, Mr. Chalka, Pak Imam Aschuri, dan Budini Kusandiani. Well, the final session for today's seminar is a roundtable discussion about priorities for increasing climate change resilience and disaster management. The speakers for this session, Mr. Mark Rubarenzya from the Uganda National Road Authority and also PIARC National First Delegate, Vice President of PIARC, and Mr. Rubarenzya is joining us online. Mr. Marcelo Medina from the Ministry of Public Works of Chile, and also the Spanish-speaking Secretary of PIARC TC 1.5. Mr. Medina is also joining us online. Mr. Fahmi Aldiamar from the Ministry of Public Works and Housing of the Republic of Indonesia, and Dato'Ir Ganendra from MinConsult SDN BHD Malaysia. Our moderator for this session is Mr. Piotr Malléjacq, the PIARC Secretary General. So we would like to honorably invite to the podium our moderator, Mr. Piotr Malléjacq.
Good evening, everyone. I guess you must be a little bit tired after today's sessions, but again, it's my great pleasure and honor to be here with you this evening, here with everyone in Yogyakarta, and also with our colleagues who are joining online. And let's have a special thought for those colleagues who are online. And I hope they will be able to travel to Indonesia and meet their colleagues and the local culture very soon. So welcome to this session and roundtable discussion The topic is priorities for increasing climate change resilience and disaster management. So very much in keeping with the topic of the whole seminar. So we have 4 panelists, as has just been indicated, and I think for every one of them there's a small presentation, and I would first like to call for Marc-Henri Rubarenzya, and if our colleagues there at the back of the room could show the small video snippet that has been prepared. Yeah. Yeah, so welcome, Marc. Marc is joining remotely. Our second panelist is Marcelo Medina, also joining remotely. So maybe we could have the video snippet as well. Hi, Marc. So thank you to Marc and Marcelo for joining us remotely. And please bear with us if there are some IT issues. Probably there will not be any IT issue, but fingers crossed. Then I would like also to call to the floor this time our colleague Fahmi Aldiamar, who is here in Yogyakarta, and I would like to call him to the podium here with me. Thank you. And our fourth panelist is Denis Ganendra from Malaysia. Denis, here in Indonesia, thank you for joining the podium as well. And if we could have the small video. So thank you. So, and I've already introduced myself this morning. I'm Patrick Malléjacq, Secretary General of the World Road Association. So 4 panelists, a very broad topic. So so the way this is going to be organized is each of the panelists is going to present a short presentation, maybe PowerPoint slides, maybe no PowerPoint slides. We will see that. And then we have prepared questions for each of them. So I would direct questions at you. That's okay, but feel free to address any question or priority that you may want. And I would like everyone to say hello to Marc and Marcelo, who are online there. I don't know if they can see us here, but there's a camera at the back, so I hope you can see our waving hands. So hi, Marc, and hi, Marcelo. So I will start with Marc. So Marc-Henri Rubarenzya is Vice President of PIARC, actually, one of 3, so he's rare. And he's the first delegate of Uganda and member of Committee 1.4, chaired by Caroline. And in Uganda, he's the head of research and development at the National Roads Authority. And he's leading a number of projects on transportation infrastructure and services. So Marc, please, may I invite you to share some thoughts with the audience? Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and greetings all from Kampala. Such a pity that I was not able to come and be with you in Indonesia, but I really look forward to another opportunity to come and join you there to please organize another seminar. So by way of introduction, I thought I would share some thoughts about Uganda. And first of all, we do appreciate that climate change is already here. Its impact on the national road network is increasing, and there's really no quick fix. You know, some of these are very involving issues, and so when we look at, for instance, the study has been done, so between 2010 and 2050, about 51% of the impacts of climate change are going to be on infrastructure. And most of that is going to be the road network. It's going to take the largest chunk of that. So if I'm to give two recent examples, one is the West Nile region. Some of you who know Uganda, this is an area of about 3 million people. And recently it was cut off by the River Nile because the River Nile cut a strategic road in two. And so literally you have a whole section of the country cut off. And this is the area that hosts most of the refugees. You're aware that Uganda is the largest refugee hosting country in the world. A lot of the refugees that come in from the DR Congo as well as South Sudan are in the West Nile region. So not only did the local populace get cut off, but also you found the refugees were cut out. So what do we do typically? What we've been doing when we come across such disasters is we first have some emergency intervention, see that there is some form of connectivity. In this particular case, we had to get an alternative route so that supplies can get into the refugee communities. And then we went in immediately, undertook damage and needs assessment and restoration. Our aim has always been to restore connectivity within about 3 days. And to do that, we actually had to deploy 23 stations across the country. And depending on the information we get from the meteorological office, we see how to transfer our equipment to stations where we expect a disaster to be severe. So in this case, we were able to have connectivity restored in 2 days. And that's just getting some form of restoration. Now, when it comes to recovery, that is now reconstruction. Now, that is where we tend to get into challenges because that's a very expensive undertaking. And so we're not even thinking to that as yet. We are looking at let's restore and let's just keep connectivity. And in terms of thinking through this strategically as a country, we've done a mapping of what we think are black spots. These are very vulnerable areas which are vulnerable to, say, landslides and flooding. And the map is there. The challenge has been implementation because realizing the amount of funds that are required to make these interventions is very, very difficult. So to do this then, government has come up with a whole of government initiative, which is looking at an appreciation that yes, climate risk cannot be reduced to zero, but we need to see how to reduce that as well as give vulnerable people the ability to cope with these. So coping with climate change impacts in one sector is already complicated enough when you look at, say, the transport sector. But when we come to governments, governments are looking at all sectors. That adds a degree of complexity. Some of the key challenges that we have found as Uganda involves coordination gaps and inadequacy of information, as well as duplication of efforts across sectors, because everybody is doing something about it, and sometimes you're duplicating resources, as well as operationalizing of national guidance documents have been difficult due to weak institutional structures. There's been inadequate funding, as I mentioned. There's been inadequate technical support from various ministries and agencies, few trained staff, as well as the population. Because when we even provide early warning and indicators, then you tend to get the instances where the population will not take heed and do what is required of them. So that's a snapshot of the situation in Uganda, and I believe it's a good way to introduce this discussion. Thank you, Patrick.
Questions in the room and online, so please note those questions. There will be enough time later on. Our second speaker is also online, Marcelo Medina, works in Chile with the Ministry of Public Works and is also Spanish-speaking secretary of our committee, 1.5, chaired by Yukio. And he's National Sub-Department Chief of In-House Road Maintenance, and is also the National Emergency Coordinator and Border Crossing Coordinator, so quite a large portfolio. So Marcelo, the floor is yours for a 5-minute.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I have a little presentation. That's my presentation. Thank you very much. I talk about this societal resilience regarding disaster management. Next, please. Resilience, according to disaster management, and to express it in a simple way, it's to keep the emergency cycle working properly, with the aim of keeping the distribution chain operational as long as possible. Next one, please. Next slide. Okay. And that's it to maintain the transitability or connectivity. So, I mean, if I want to go from the point A to point B on that, along with that road, that would be keeping transitability. Or if I can get from A to point B through that point C, that would be connectivity. In simple way, that would be two concepts in this topic. Next one, please. Now, to keep this cycle, the emergency cycle, running properly, information is the most important asset. It's mainly needed for everything. You know? This is the key. Okay, it's important, and it's important because it covers two fundamental objectives. Next one, please. Next slide. The first one is inform the authorities, of course, involved in this emergency, whatever it was, and inform the road users. That belongs to that. It's related to response and recovery phases of the emergency cycle. And the other one, the other objective, is to generate that historic database, and that's involved with preparedness and mitigation phases. Next one, please. All this information need to be managed. It's very necessary for that technology, information tools. You know, we have big data, social network for that, websites, risk maps, emergency maps, all those things that we use. No, but however, this information management needs, next one, please. This information management needs the most difficult and laborious part, which requires permanent attention, and that means social resilience. So to keep, and what I mean with this is, in the point of view of disaster management, is keep informed users through permanent information and education, and also trained officials, permanent training programs. Next one, please. Because we need these trained officials, we need this information technology to be very well understood, very well known by the officials, because they collect the information. They collect and then they manage the information. So that it's very important in all this cycle. You know? We have here the two poles of the management of the information reflected here. The beginning is the official trained officials, where we collect the information, where we get the information, and the end of this chain is the informed users, well-informed users who understand and respect the information they're given to them. That's very important. Users can also be a great information source through open source platforms, everything. In summary, nothing would make sense if, with all the technology and information management, it is not possible to inform the users, or the information collected, it has low quality, or a low efficient or low or efficient management. Next one, please. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Patrick.
Have you here on site. You're the head of the implementation unit of geotechnics, tunnel and structure at the Directorate General of Highways here in Indonesia. And you graduated from Bandung Institute of Technology, where you have a doctoral program, and you're very active in geotechnics, tunnels, and earthquakes, apparently. Very important job. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have a presentation also, if I may. Okay. So I would like to also introduce, this is a kind of a prototype that we are currently developed in Indonesia. So as you know that many bridges are constructed in Indonesia, and the condition is around more than 20 years in terms of the age of the bridge. So the one that I would like to present is regarding the bridge health monitoring system, but mainly for a conventional bridge. Next, please. Okay, there are three topics that I would like to discuss further on. First is for the vulnerability. This is one of the case for cyclone disaster in Indonesia in 2021. And then the concept of the conventional bridge monitoring system. And the third one is the technical guidelines and specification. So this is the condition that struck Indonesia in 2021 in East Nusa Tenggara. As you know, this is quite a huge cyclone, tropical cyclone. It's called the Seroja cyclone tropical. And the disaster in our bridge, especially in conventional bridge, is also quite huge. As you can see here at the right bottom one, the Irawuri bridge damage. So the bridge is almost collapsed due to the flood. And also in the Taramana bridge, this is also one of the example when the bridge approach is also collapsed. Next. So this is the current prototype that we are developing. This is called Simbagas, a bridge inspection, but not manually using a data monitoring system. There are some sensors that placed into the bridge. Next. And this is a typical position of the instrumented place. So we are divided into three kind of bridge that usually construct in Indonesia. There are girder bridge, and then truss bridge, and also arc bridge. And we are also evaluate that there are points that very sensitive that we have to evaluate. For example, if we have some disruption for earthquake, for example, so we need some accelerometer that installed in the bridge. And also for flood, we also had to evaluate regarding the river basin itself. So this is one of the evaluation that we are currently review, which place is the accurate position for the instrumented data. Next, please. And then this is one of the example that we are conducting. This is in the West Java. It's called the CPLS bridge. So we have developed the web-based and also the information system. And then this is quite integrated. So we have a solar panel for the data energy, and then the sensor and also the transmission of the data remotely. So we can have daily information regarding the condition of the bridge. Next. And this is one of the examples. So this is currently undergoing, and we can set up some kind of a warning. So if there are some limitation that we can put on the database, so we can also know the deterioration of the bridge. So in terms of the time itself, after 20 or 30 years, so how about the condition? Is it still good enough, or there are some defect regarding the condition of the bridge? So the one that example here in the screen is the accelerometer data. So we have the boundary, lower and upper one, and also the temperature of the bridge. Next. And then this is the currently undergoing. We are also having a collaboration with Korean. This is the Korean Ministry of Environment and also K-Waters, and also the Director General of Highway. So there are some sensors that are going to be installed in the Wei-Pesi East Nusa Tenggara that currently will collect the data regarding the elevation of the river and also the condition of the river basin itself. Next. And then this is the last one. This is also a kind of a guideline that we are developing in order to have the instrumented or the system that can be installed throughout the nation. Probably that's all that I can present today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And please, in the audience, on-site or online, if you have questions, please make sure to note them down and save them for later. Our fourth and last panelist is Dennis. I'm sure many of us here know Dennis Ganendra, who's CEO of Min Consult in Malaysia, and he's active in many countries internationally and has worked with many funding agencies like ADB, World Bank, IDB, and JICA, to name a few. And he has an engineering career spanning over 30 years, so I will not mention your education. Dennis, please.
Thank you, Patrick. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the great honor of being the last speaker in the last session in a very long day. So I will take you through my slides very quickly. I'm going to start off with what Patrick started off today, which is the importance of road and building roads to realize UN SDG goals. Next. But what we must also appreciate is that 24% of CO2 emissions come from the transport sector, and of that, 74% comes from the road transport sector. So we, as engineers, also have a responsibility to reduce climate change. And what I'd like to present to you firstly is two projects, which really is, I believe, at the front end of cutting down emissions in the road transport sector. So the first one, next, is the Kuching Urban Transportation System, KUTS, and we believe this will be the first green hydrogen-based automated transit system. For the transit system to work, it can't be a single line by itself. Essentially, it's 3 lines covering 72 kilometers over 31 stations, fully powered using a green hydrogen. Next. And that's what the train, the bus looks like. Essentially, it's an automated bus. You got the 2 ends, which have got the driving cabins, and then in the middle you have the battery system, which is auxiliary supply, as well as also a backup in case anything happens to the hydrogen. Next. And these are the great environmental benefits of the project. So obviously, as a public transport project, there's the natural benefits of that. But on top of that, because it's a green hydrogen-based system, we're looking at maybe 70,000 tons of displaced CO2 from this project by itself. Next. And these are the other benefits. It's in my slides, which I think will be shared to all of you. Next. Next. The other project, which is also very interesting, I would like to share with you all, is the Karachi BRT Red Line. And here there are 3 very interesting features. Again, the fuel system is important. So here we're using green methane fuel. The very important environmental feature as well is that the hydraulic cell retention cells that we're having, and of course the green lane strips. So next. Again, this is 1 line within a transit system for the whole city, but this line is the one which really boasts the greatest environmental benefits. Next. So I touched on it earlier on. The fuel is essentially 1,800 tons of cow manure per day. So in essence, we take all that cow manure and we convert that into green methane fuel, and 2/3 of that will be used to run the buses, and 1/3 will be used for power generation. You also get liquid effluent from that, which can be used for industrial water or irrigation, and you also get a very good biofertilizer that comes out from that. Next. Another important feature in this is the green lane strips. So rather than paving across the whole of the dedicated lanes, we use the lane strips. So what this does is it reduces the drainage requirements, helps in replenishment of groundwater, reduces roadway materials, reduction in the carbon footprint, reduction in noise level, and we believe it's also going to be very aesthetically pleasing. Next. And the other important feature we have here is these hydraulic retention cells. So in addition to your conventional drainage system, you have these special hydraulic cells which collect water and goes into an irrigation system. So in times of drought, it can be used as an irrigation system as well as also for flood retention purposes. Next. And of course, the great benefits of it, again, a lot of carbon reduction, about 62,000 tons per year. Next. And a lot of other benefits to it. There's also a big gender, social impact of it. So separate ticketing lane for ladies and all that. Again, a very big, important issue in the town of Karachi. Next. And the next thing I want to touch on is that, climate change is real. It's impacting our designs already. What we have here is the duration rainfall curves. And the black line you see there is the baseline historical data. But now we've analyzed recent data in Malaysia, and we've come up with the red line, which is what we are saying is the impact of climate change. And what does this all mean? If you go to the next slide. Next slide. We've come up with the climate change factor for hydraulic design. And what it is you do your normal hydraulic calculation and then you apply the climate change factor to the flows. And what you can see is flows have increased by up to 50% in certain parts of the country. So it's not just rainfall that's been affected. Go next. What we can see also, the wind speeds are much higher now. So if we look at historical data and look at current data for wind speeds, and we've had to update all the wind speeds in the country, and you can see in some places wind speeds have increased by 30%, principally due to climate change. So I just want to end by saying that as engineers, we're really good at mitigating the impacts of climate change. So we do all this great engineering to mitigate the impacts of it. But I think as engineers, we also have to do our bit to reduce carbon emissions. And that should not just be in the projects that we work on, but also in the way we run our companies and operate our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I'm very interested to see that the hydrogen in Kuching will come from hydropower, luckily. And so we have prepared a number of questions for our panelists before the floor is given to the audience. So we'll start with Mark, if that's okay with everyone. So Mark, let me ask you, what are the main priorities and challenges for increasing road resilience, specifically in low and middle income countries? It would be great if you could share some thoughts on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the very first thing I would like to start with in reference to LMICs is the competing priorities that we have for finite resources. In LMICs, it's even more obvious that we have a limited amount of resources available to governments, which they have to distribute across sectors. So governments find themselves forced to prioritize actions and make very, very difficult choices in order to fit their resource envelopes and their capacity. So one thing you're dealing with is balancing climate change and adaptation and resilience against maternal health and against education and security and all other sectors. It's very, very difficult for us to appreciate it at the level of us technical people. But when you look at it at the strategical level of the countries, these are very, very difficult trade-offs. And it is something we need to be mindful of as a technical community in how do we communicate to governments to elevate the issues of climate change to a higher status in amidst all the competing priorities. Another thing that is very common across LMICs is the weak institutional and legal frameworks that are available to governments, as well as lack of consistent monitoring systems for monitoring the progress. So as some of my colleagues have shown, they've shown cases where there's interventions and even if it's not explicitly stated, it's implicit that there is in place mechanisms for monitoring progress. Because sometimes we're very good to cheer ourselves on that, yes, we've put an intervention in mind, but climate change is not a linear phenomenon. In certain cases, it may be accelerating faster than others. So how are we responding? We shouldn't just tick boxes and say that's done and move on. But again, mindful of the finite resources. So this takes good planning. There's also very poor coordination across governments, which is making it difficult to collect and provide information. This poor competition goes back to the resources, because once you have resource constraints, then sometimes collaboration and coordination is sacrificed. And so you find the issues of collecting information on climate risks, clarification of responsibilities and who's liable for what, supporting innovation and accessing best technologies, as well as ensuring that financing is available to all, especially to the solutions that are going to come with high upfront costs. Because as we've seen with the example of the buses and the bus systems, they are really great, but there is a huge upfront cost. So how are we going to ensure that funding is made available for these kind of solutions that have long-term benefit? There's a problem which I call non-inclusive development, because you do have stratification of society, and so it's difficult to have success in terms of adaptation strategies if we do not ensure that vulnerable populations have the financial, technical, and institutional resources required to help them adapt. Because we need to realize that these are the same people who are affected the most. And so they stand to benefit the most from these interventions of adaptation and enhanced resilience. But they are competing against basic survival needs. So if you find somebody with, say, poor land use practices, it's not so much that they want to farm the hillsides so that they generate landslides, which are then going to destroy their infrastructure and probably kill them. It's because they have no option. They've got no choices. So it's about, do you die today or do you die 10 years from now? Putting it bluntly. Sometimes that's what the choice is all about. And so we need to have ways as LMIC governments to partner with the poorest people to provide direct support. For instance, if we want them, the example I gave, improve land use practices, partner with them to find income substitution or land livelihood substitution. Because these people cannot afford to invest in adaptation, and yet they're very vulnerable and they are most prone to feeling the effects. So I believe that is, I'll leave it at that for now.
I wonder about the importance of collaboration for adaptation to climate change or extreme weather. Do you have any experience on this in Chile or in international networks? Thank you, Marcelo.
Hello, Patrick again. Collaboration is the key for everything. Adaptation to climate change implies that disasters that will usually occur will vary over the time. So the areas that did not suffer certain types of disaster or with less intensities will begin to have more important effects. In this sense, we can not only think about individual expectations as high-level organizations, but to take the next step. It is necessary that the information combined with other related organizations allow us to improve the product that we can deliver to the users in general, as also what each organization requires. Therefore, collaboration between organizations is the key. It can also be taken to more internal level, which refers to social resilience within the organizations, where collaboration is essential and is the basis taking the next step and go further in this management of disasters and all this climate change that we have now. I very agree what Mark said about the lack of our governments to have this to keep continuity on this long project, because it's not only for one government for 4 years term. It's a very long-term project, this adaptation. So it requires collaboration along all sectors. I think that is happening here in Chile.
It's not always easy, but we're working on that. Fahmi, question for you, if that's okay. So Indonesia, our host country, and thanks again to the ministry and to our colleagues in Indonesia for the hospitality. What are the priority issues in adaptation and resilience? So quite a broad question.
Okay, thank you. So the first priority is for building back better for condition where, especially when the region is prone to disaster. That is the first thing that prioritized. And then the second one is, as you know, as the early discussion from Pak Ari. So we also know that there are some regulation that we are going to evaluate, because the one that recently occurred, for example, yesterday, the Cianjur earthquake. So that is the earthquake that, even though there are many scientists refer that this is according to the near fault that near the location, but frankly, it is still unidentified. So there are still many cases where regarding the disaster, many things that we are not fully understand for the time being. So we are still continue developing regarding the standard itself. And then regarding the network, as you know that the problem for flood is currently undergo for big cities, for example, in Jakarta, yeah, and also in big city others. For example, in Semarang, we also have some drought. So the seawater is already been increasing. So many problems regarding that. So the infrastructure also had to deal with that kind of problem. So in terms of the resilience, I think more environmental friendly is the one key that we are going to getting more bold. And then the second one is how to prevent for people to build something that is under the specification that we are regulated. So the quality of the construction is also the main problem that we are going to face. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. And Dennis, question for you. Well, planning is essential in general and in transportation projects in particular. So how can climate change be included early in the process of planning?
So Patrick, when we draw up structure plans and local plans in Malaysia, as early as maybe even 5 years ago, climate change wasn't even a chapter that we talked about. But that has really changed significantly in recent years. And now climate change is really a big part of whatever structured local plans that we draw up. And these are the sort of activities that we do. So firstly, we look at for us, the two issues is really flooding and landslides. You look at the hazard mapping, you map on the land use, and you come up with the risk maps. Based on that, for both flooding and for landslides, we come up with 3 strategies. The first one is prevention, so you know where not to put things in future. The next thing is planned resilience. So these are the upgrades in infrastructure and so forth, so that we can mitigate the risk. And the worst case scenario is relocation. That, of course, is really the worst case scenario, but in certain cases, there is no choice but to relocate communities. That's one part of it. And now, a very important part of our plans is also to come up with emergency response plan. And that comes in 3 phases as well. The planning stage, so we make sure that all the MOUs with all the relevant agencies, the training, and all the centers, the flood detention centers are already all in place. And then the execution phase, so that whenever a flood happens, then we list down all the activities that needs to be done during that phase, the mobilization of the people, the opening up of the flood centers and all that. And then the last phase is the recovery stage. We have to cover that as well, which is once everything resides, how quickly we get back to infrastructure, how quickly we repair the damage, and so on and so forth. So you can see it's quite a thorough process, right from beginning to end, that we now have to consider when doing planning.
Thank you so much. So, considering that it's already 5:30, I would like to invite questions from the audience now. So maybe there are questions from the floor here in Yogyakarta. So if so, please raise your hand and come to one of the microphones. And then we will invite questions from the online participants. And I would rely on the co-moderators to relay those questions. So first, are there questions from the audience here in Yogyakarta? Anyone here? I don't see any hand, actually. Oh, there's one here. Please move to one of the microphones. Thank you very much. Please introduce yourself when asking the question.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Edwin. I'm come from West Kalimantan Road Implementation Unit. Just a quick question for you, Mr. Dennis. I know in the middle of, everyone is talking about electric vehicles, but now you're doing this hydrogen fuels technology and a green stripe drainage, isn't it? So I just want to ask you about, in terms of safety, how is it, safety and maintenance of those technology? Is it safe, to use hydrogen fuels? And in terms of road safety, if you create stripes in the middle of the road, things happen, right? So if something, the bus can slip into the stripe in the middle. So how is it in terms of maintenance and the safety of the technology? Thank you.
I think that's a very important question. We are really at the front end of hydrogen technology, and definitely safety, transportation of hydrogen, keeping it safe on the buses is a very big part of it. We have to go through a certification process for all new vehicles that we put on the road, And all that comes with a lot of modeling for the impact, so the effects of impact, collision impact on these buses. So that's why the award for the buses are quite early, but it's going to be the first of its type. It's done quite early so there's enough time so that we can do all the tests and the modeling to ensure that the system is safe. In terms of the lane strips are actually dedicated bus lanes. So it's really only for the buses. Yeah, so no other cars are meant to go on it. So the bus drivers are trained to do on it. But the things that you put in between, though it looks good, also must be firm. Yeah, so that in case the buses go off the lanes, it's still on a firm ground, so it doesn't nothing serious happens to it. So from that point of view, it's relatively safe. Yeah. But I think you touched on something quite important as well, which is on electric vehicles. You know, I think we must take a more holistic view when we look at things. So there's a view that if you get an electric vehicle, that's it, you're doing a great job for the environment. But that's not always true. You know, so if you use a petrol car, it's about 0.192 kilograms of CO2 per kilometer, which is expended in a petrol car. But if you use an electric car and the grid is dirty, so in Sarawak, where Quds is, the grid is very green. But in Peninsular Malaysia, the grid is actually quite dirty. So about 40+% of our grid is powered by coal, and renewables is less than 20%. So when you have a dirty grid, you actually could, because you need the grid to charge the car, you actually could use up as much CO2 in an electric car in operation as you would in a petrol car. So that's why you need to look at things more holistically and not in a blinkered approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you very much. Is there any other question from the floor here in Yogyakarta? So let me ask the co-moderator if there is any question online from our online participants.
No question.
No question. So I will have more questions from my side. So it's a question for you, Mark. So you are familiar with PIARC's climate change adaptation framework, and I was wondering, it's a framework, so it's supposedly applied to all sorts of countries, high income as well as low middle income countries. But you're the expert, so what's your impression of this? Please, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. First of all, I'd like to say in my introductory remarks that low and middle income countries are very, very diverse, and they're spread across Latin America, Africa, Europe, Asia, and west of that. And so it's not easy to have a blanket response to this. I mean, as we've just heard from Indonesia, they're actually applying the principles of the framework, although it may not be the framework per se. So I'll just give some quick thoughts that should be applicable generally across LMICs. And one is that the framework would be very well used to prepare and limit the negative impacts of climate change by helping in the identification of vulnerabilities and planning. And it gives an organized way to do this so that we have uniformity. So that would be a very good way of applying the framework. And then the other is that the framework could be used to actually support better land use planning to protect critical infrastructure. Because in addition to directly supporting households and businesses, it's important that governments play a key role in protecting public investments, assets, and services. And land use is a key determinant in this. So the climate change adaptation framework could be a very good tool to be used by governments to support that. And finally, as we've heard from an earlier presentation, information is key to application of the framework. Without good information, it's really not very useful that you know how to apply this framework. So countries could invest in acquisition of the right data, risk models, and decision-making models, so that with this data, the incremental cost of building resilience into new infrastructure is small, which is about 3%, as well as adaptation of infrastructure is also quite small. And so this is where the framework would come to its greatest use in LMICs. But like I've said, LMICs are very broad, and there is application of facets of the framework. So each LMIC would be advised to go and study the framework and see what they can do to augment what they're already doing to have the benefit of what PIC has to offer. Thank you, Patrick.
And if you're not familiar with that framework, it's available from PIARC's website, piarc.org. Please go check and download that. And we are now working with our committees to improve and expand it. So, more questions? More questions. Marcelo, we need to keep you awake. What are the main obstacles for carrying out adaptation and building resilience? So we know it's challenging, but if you could name 2 or 3 major obstacles, what would that be? Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, well, it's very early for me. I've been awake from 5 o'clock in the morning. So well, in my presentation, I indicate that from the point of view of disaster management, the most important asset is the information. In the low-income countries, information is not necessarily primary and tends to be, well, let's say, neglected sometimes. So, in part because it's not within the objectives of the government sometimes, or it is assumed that each organization has a certain level of digitalization of the process. And therefore, the information bases are assumed to be correct and updated and up to date. But however, that's not entirely correct sometimes. As Mark said, information is the key for adaptation, for everything. In general, information is generated according to short-term expectations under specific concepts and partially known sometimes within the same organizations. And that will not necessarily consider or have a common index to allow this information to be shared sometimes. So in summary, I will say that the lack of continuity in projects of this nature does not allow faster execution. Also, depending on the expectation of the incoming governments, distortion are generated in the vision of the objectives to be achieved. And finally, the lack of communication or collaboration with the organizations are generally the elements that make it difficult to adapt and build the resilience. Yeah, that's what I think.
So, thank you, Marcelo. Information. Fahmi, I have a question. It's short, but the answers could be really long. So, I was wondering, many of us in the room are engineers. Not all of us, I hope. But what would be the innovations and technologies that would be the most useful to increase resilience, in your opinion?
So I think the important one is regarding the one that mentioned before, the information itself. So we can act fast and respond regarding to the information that we got. So in terms of the climate, I think the inter-organization is important to have a good correlation and good coordination. So the information regarding the change of the weather, change of the rain intensity is very important for us, for engineers also to evaluate and also to make a response. For example, we have some instrumented bridge that we are connected with transmitted data directly to our office. But in terms of the evaluation of the data, is still undergoing. So that's also a problem regarding the alert system. So when we are going to come to the bridge to check is there a problem or not, so that is another problem that we are currently facing. But I think the important one for the young engineers is how to retrieve the data, how to evaluate, and how to make it a good information for government, for example. So the university and us had to be collaborate for that. I think that I can share for the time being.
Thank you. So that's 2 panelists out of 4 voting for information.
Yeah.
And a last question for Dennis, unless there's anyone from the floor or from the online participants. So this will be, sorry, I mean, this is impolite. You should have the last word as the host. But Dennis, so we sometimes talk about holistic approaches. I'm not sure everyone knows exactly what that means. But is this something you would advocate for adaptation to climate change and resilience? Or would you favor more targeted approaches?
I think you need to really look at it from a holistic point of view and look at it. Let's look at the projects that we're working on. You know, so we've developed the Minconsult sustainability tools, which doesn't just look at climate change, but all the sustainability goals, and really tries to drive all the sustainability goals in all our projects. So it's a tool to maximize those benefits, but also a very good way of measuring it, because not only do we have to do it nowadays, more and more organizations are being asked to measure all these aspects. But it shouldn't be limited to only our projects, which should also be to the impact on our operations and on our lives. So as a company, we've made the SBTI Climate Change Pledge, making us actually the first company in the engineering construction sector in the ASEAN region to make this pledge. And it's really impacted all aspects of our operations in our life, including the way we dress. So in our company, we've actually dialed up the temperature in all our rooms to 27 degrees. And I haven't worn a tie for literally months, and I'm wearing one just because I'm here today. But the dress code from our office, from shirt and tie and jackets, everyone is now wearing short sleeve shirts, and it's a much cooler environment.
Thank you. Yeah, in Japan, they created cool bees some years ago, and now there's warm bees, I've heard. So indeed, we need to be practical. So let's close the session now. And if anyone in the audience would like to interact with the panelists, again, of course, this will be really welcome, but they're going to be here tomorrow. So please, everyone, enjoy your evening. I would like to thank our hosts again for organizing the seminar today and this session in particular. And I would like to extend a very warm thank you to our 4 panelists, including our 2 panelists who are joining remotely. So maybe we can give them a hand. Thank you. Goodbye, Mark, and goodbye, Marcelo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all the presenters and moderator for the session, Mr. Patrick Malléjacq, Mr. Rubarenzya, Mr. Medina, Fahmi, and Mr. Ganendra. Please, a big applause for them. Well, we have now come to the end of the seminar day 1. Big applause to all of us. What a great presentation and discussion we had today. Well, on behalf of the host and the organizing committee, we extend our appreciation for your tremendous support and your active participation during today's seminar. And thank you all the participants who are joining online. Tomorrow we will have a seminar day 2. Looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Finally, we wish you a great evening and please enjoy your stay in Yogyakarta, one of the best tourism cities in Indonesia. Thank you very much. Good evening. Sebagai informasi, Bapak dan Ibu yang akan mengikuti site visit atau technical visit pada hari Kamis, dimohon untuk mengisi link pendaftaran. Link pendaftaran ada di barcode di sebelah, di bawah ID card Bapak Ibu sekalian. Mohon untuk dapat diisi. Terima kasih.